Good God, 6 games in and we're still on the NES. So why is Mega Man 6 getting its own separate review? Well, in actuality, Mega Man 6 is the very first Mega Man game I've ever played and owned. 1994 is when I was officially introduced to the series via this game. Now, even though I've been familiar with this game since '94, it doesn't really mean anything in the long run. In fact, I didn't actually beat this game until this very review. You see, back when I was a kid, I got my jollies from the likes of Super Mario World, Super Metroid, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Final Fantasy VI, the list goes on. But, seeing this is the game that did introduce me to the franchise as a whole, I felt it deserved its own video. And if you don't agree with that, well, I'm already walking towards the TV to plug this baby in. Believe it or not, Mega Man 6 has not seen a digital release on the Nintendo Wii's Virtual Console. It stops at 5 for some reason. It saw a virtual release on the 3DS Virtual Console, but it's a console game. So, direct from my Nintendo Entertainment System, it's Mega Man 6. There we go. Now it's 1994. If there was one thing I immediately had nostalgic flashbacks with, it was Mega Man 6's soundtrack. Man, I almost forgot how good this soundtrack was, with my favorite being Blizzard Man stage. I love this theme. Almost all the songs in this game are well composed without it being on the repetitive side. Give it a listen when you get the chance to do so. Mega Man 6 was released in 1993. The Super Nintendo was already out for 2 years at this point, so why did they feel the need to stick to the NES for this installment? In fact, Mega Man X, the beginning of the next generation of Mega Man games, predates this title by about 2 months in North America. Were people willing to jump back a generation and play yet another sequel to a series that should have jumped to the SNES for some time now? You know what else I noticed when researching the series so far? There's barely any commercials for Mega Man games. For Americans anyway, I found a few Japanese commercials, but how exactly was Mega Man advertised in the US besides the likes of Nintendo Power? Anyway, the game begins with the opening of the first annual Robot Masters tournament, where Robot Masters from all over the world compete to see who's the greatest. I like to think of it like Robot Wars, only with more personality. However, the head of the tournament, known as Mr. X, has decided to reprogram the final 8 Robot Masters of the tournament and use them to begin taking over the world. Mega Man, alongside his faithful companion Rush, vows to stop Mr. X and his schemes for world domination. Mega Man's latest journey takes the Blue Bomber all across the world, since every Robot Master hails from a different region. Japan, China, England, Canada, it's all here. As a result, the areas Mega Man travels in have more distinctive identities than ever before, and it's refreshing to boot. For the 6th title in the franchise, that's quite the feat to accomplish. The Robot Masters also look a little better this time around in terms of design. One thing I really didn't bring attention to until now was that since Mega Man 2, Capcom decided to throw contests to let kids help design Robot Masters for the developers to use. Mega Man 6 was the first to allow kids outside Japan get a chance at designing them. How much influence they actually had in the grand scheme of things I'm not sure, but I think they really nailed something here. These Robot Masters look pretty good, maybe a little goofy at times. But in terms of the game's structure, it's all something we're very familiar with at this point. There's 8 bad guys, you're one good guy, bam boom bop kablooey, final boss time. Mega Man's still rocking the same moveset as before, with the Mega Buster still keeping its Mega Man 5 properties. As you can no doubt tell from the cover of the game, there is one new thing Mega Man is packing this time, the Rush adapters. Now what I mean by that is that instead of the usual Rush Coil, Rush Marine, or Rush Jet, Mega Man now utilizes Rush by fusing with him, giving him 2 different forms known as Power Mega Man and Jet Mega Man. You gotta beat certain Robot Masters to gain access to them first for some arbitrary reason, but man oh man, do yourself a favor and get these upgrades as soon as you can. Power Mega Man punches the shit out of things and can also break certain blocks to either reveal goodies, or a completely different pathway that has even more goodies. It's not exactly what I would call mobile, and you can't even slide when using it, but when it's useful, it's very useful. Then there's Jet Mega Man, which allows Mega Man to temporarily fly for about 2 seconds, which doesn't sound like much, but trust me on this, it's fantastic for bypassing hazards and, again, reaching different pathways to collect health and such. It doesn't beat Rush Jet from Mega Man 3 in my honest opinion, but come on, this is pretty cool looking. But taking different pathways doesn't just lead to health pickups, it also leads to different entryways to certain robot masters, and if you manage to beat them, you're rewarded with one of 4 beat parts. Collect all 4 and you have access to beat the bird once more, though it no longer targets bosses for some odd reason. Not that it matters a whole lot, because Mega Man 6 as a whole just might be one of the easiest Mega Man games I've ever played so far. First off, a majority of the level design isn't quite as dickish as it was in the last 2 installments, although this part in Plant Man stage can outright suck it. If you remember what I said in the earlier reviews that patience and observation is the key to winning, then that mindset will not only let you easily breeze through these stages, but you'll also most likely max out on energy tanks by the 4th Robot Master. Thanks Eddie, but I already have like 9 of these things. Adding to this is the overall reduced difficulty of the Robot Masters. Some of these guys put up almost no fight or have strategies that are incredibly predictable. I always make sure to have enough weapon energy to easily deal with a Robot Master with its proper weakness, but any of these guys will make an ideal choice for your first pick. Finally, the weapons you get from said Robot Masters are once again pretty sweet to use. Definitely better than the likes of Mega Man 4 or 5. I love the Flame Blast you get for beating Flame Man. It's not only powerful, but the residue it leaves is just as strong. Weapons like the Silver Tomahawk, the Yamato Spear, and Night Crush are also great because they're not only strong, they pierce shields, which I find particularly handy when dealing with these assholes. If that wasn't enough, there's Centaur Flash, which like the Rain Flash in Mega Man 4, acts like a screen nuke. It doesn't work on all of the enemies, but it works on enough of them to be useful in many situations. Really, the only 2 weapons I don't find myself using that much is the Blizzard Attack and the Plant Barrier. Come to think of it, I think this is the only time I use it without fighting a Robot Master. I'm glad to see the weapons being so great to use again. That's what makes Mega Man games fun to me. The increase in replay value you get when you're able to try different ways to complete levels with different weapons or tactics. The Mega Buster is great and all, but Mega Man is capable of so much more, and I'm happy the developers realize that. Alright, Mr. X, time to die. Oh wait, shit robot. I can never reach this cracked window easily in the first Mr. X stage. How did they expect you to reach this with Power Mega Man with these sort of platforms? Well, if you can manage to reach it, it is a pretty nifty shortcut complete with 4 extra lives, but I already maxed out before getting here, so it's not really special in the end. The bosses of the Mr. X stages really aren't putting up much of a challenge. Not even Mr. X himself. I wonder if this means that—
Yeah, that was pretty much what I was expecting. Okay, I don't get it. Why the Mr. X facade? Especially after taking control of all 8 Robot Masters.
Mega Man 6's story is probably the stupidest of them all. First off, we clearly saw that Wily escaped at the end of Mega Man 5. That loose end wasn't tied, so why bother with the whole Mr. X thing? It's so obviously Wily. But maybe that's the joke. The plot is so damn shallow and ridiculous to the point of being funny. Well, since Wily's scheme for world domination is now failed, Wily retreats into yet another Wily fortress I'm assuming he built in his spare time. But as Wily should have expected, this doesn't hold Mega Man for very long. The Wily Fortress stages in this game are a piece of cake. This dinosaur isn't much of a challenge, this turret is laughably easy, and all 3 Wily bosses are weak to the Silver Tomahawk. Perhaps this symbolizes something. Maybe Wily's resources at this point are stretched to the breaking point, and that his Mr. X scheme failing was the final nail in the coffin. Why else would the climax of this final battle be so easy? Okay, so Wily is down and out for the 6th time, and oh sweet merciful, Mega Man brought a rope!
The Robot Boy finally did something logical and captured Dr. Wily.
Alright, to be fair, the endings in the last few Mega Man games didn't exactly leave Mega Man much opportunity to take advantage of the situation, but I still think the ending of 4 is utter horseshit. Still, considering Mega Man just left Wily hanging in the first 2 games, it's good to see Mega Man actually follow up by having Wily arrested this time.
Triumphant at last, Mega Man arrested the notorious Dr. Wily and brought him to justice. Sentenced to prison for his crimes, Dr. Wily now rules over a prison cell. At long last, the world is at peace.
Whew, that's a relief. It's taken us 6 games, but Dr. Wily has now seen
To be continued.
an excuse to break out of jail.
Well, without thinking about the future for the time being, Mega Man 6, as the last Mega Man game to be released on the NES, is a damn fine game. The environments are nice and varied, the soundtrack is great, the gameplay changes, while small, are enough to make the game stand out on its own merits, and it's great for those looking for a good time. It may not be very difficult, in fact with it being one of the easiest titles in the franchise, I'm surprised it took me this long to beat it, but the design of the game is well constructed and balanced enough for it to not be an issue. Fun shouldn't just be determined by how hard a game is.
That closes the chapter on that book. For the next game in the lineup, we're finally moving on to the Super Nintendo. Yeah, I cannot believe it's taken us this long to finally move up a system. But what adventures await Mega Man in a 16-bit world? Well, tune in next week with Mega Man 7 for the Super Nintendo.